Our story begins with a guy named Shizuki, a high school student. One day, when he walked into class, he overheard a group of girls talking about him. They told a girl that they saw her talking to Shizuki, and at one point they even thought she was hanging out with a strange person. The girl replied that Shizuki was disgusting, nothing special, but she added that, if they befriended such a vile person, wouldn't they stand out more? Hearing that, the group of girls quietly commented that the girl was really evil. Shizuki, accidentally hearing these words, felt her heart ache. It was a painful memory from Shizuki's past, the day he realized the cruelty behind his beauty and understood his lowly position in everyone's eyes, leaving him with an unbearable sadness. Now, in the classroom, Shizuki was sitting alone when a male friend approached and asked him to go to lunch together. Shizuki politely replied that she would join after completing her notes. The friend commented that Shizuki wrote too slowly. Shizuki denied, explaining that it was difficult for him to see the board from the back of the classroom. The boy agreed and added that Shizuki had to hurry, or Harino would take his seat. Shizuki nodded in agreement. When his friend left, Shizuki felt happy because her plan had succeeded perfectly. He remembered the day he decided to start over from scratch in high school, and how he worked hard to correct all his shortcomings. After just 1 week, he became part of the middle-class society he always wanted. Especially when he was previously just an anonymous student in middle school. This feeling for Shizuki was a complete success. He recalls getting into a pretty good school, a school where no one knew about his shady past. Except for one person, Shizuka Kusunoki. This girl was his high school classmate, and was rumored to be the most beautiful girl that year. As soon as she entered school, there were many stories about her being confessed to or being a model. Shizuki had never talked to her directly, but he believed he knew her well. According to Shizuki, Kusunoki is just like him, a person with a past that he wants to keep hidden. Even though they were in different classes, they had gone to the library together, so they knew about each other. At this moment, a group of boys were standing next to Kusunoki. Shizuki stood up, telling himself that he had decided to never get involved with beautiful girls again. He firmly told himself that staying away from Kusunoki was the best thing. Shizuki left the classroom, thinking that even though they were both from the lowest class, he doubted they would ever mention it in the future. As Shizuki was walking, he noticed Kusunoki following and looking at him. Suddenly, she stepped right in front of him and called out loudly, causing everyone around to look back, wondering what happened. But she only called Shizuki by name. Shizuki was completely stunned, not knowing what to do in this situation. He thought that maybe they would go home the same way, but he didn't expect her to proactively talk to him. He was also worried about what she wanted from him. From Kusunoki's eyes, tears began to fall. She apologized to Shizuki with a heavy heart. Shizuki was surprised by her actions. And then Kusunoki said that she was in big trouble and wished Shizuki could talk to her. Shizuki wondered what was worrying her. Kusunoki politely explains that since they attended the same junior high school, only Shizuki can help her. With a cute smile, she added that it had been a long time since she'd seen him and just wanted to quickly tell him that Shizuki had changed a lot. Hearing that, Shizuki was surprised and worried, then replied loudly that she had also changed a lot. Kusunoki was taken aback by Shizuki's outburst. Realizing what she had just done, Shizuki quickly stopped, but Kusunoki was still stunned and worriedly asked if he was okay. It seemed that she had accidentally triggered his symptoms. Ever since the day Shizuki's heart was broken by the gaze of a beautiful woman, he has suffered from a strange illness that causes him to suffer from mysterious health problems. Shizuki calmly told Kusunoki that there was nothing wrong, and suggested that they move to the park to talk because it was too crowded. They both went to the park and sat on a bench. Kusunoki politely asked Shizuki if he understood her situation. Or in other words, she changed her appearance but couldn't change what was inside. She had tried to avoid communication, but now she felt exhausted. Shizuki asked if she came to him for help since they went to the same junior high school. Kusunoki confirms that Shizuki is right. Shizuki looked at the ground and thought that maybe he could have helped her if he hadn't accidentally looked into her eyes. He tried to reassure her, saying that he wasn't very good at communicating. Kusunoki replied in surprise that that wasn't true. She said politely that Shizuki interacted with everyone in class very normally and already had friends, and she really admired him for that. Shizuki was also surprised, asked what she meant and pointed out that she also had friends. Kusunoki bowed her head and sadly said that she had no one. Shizuki was surprised, couldn't believe what she just heard. Kusunoki explains that she doesn't consider Shizuki's friends true friends just because they talk to him. As for the girls in class, it seemed like they were avoiding her. Shizuki was surprised, looking at her with curious eyes. He suddenly realized that from an outsider's perspective, Kusunoki was always surrounded by boys, which could give a bad impression of her. He thought she was a successful person, but he didn't expect her situation to be exactly the same as his. Kusunoki sighed, saying that even though she could change her appearance, she couldn't change who she was inside, so it didn't make any sense. She continued that in middle school, she was always alone because she was a bad person. Look at her. Shizuki suddenly remembered her own past. Suddenly, he stood up from his chair and loudly told her that she needed to be more confident. Kusunoki was completely surprised by this change. Shizuki continued to ask her why she wanted to change like that, adding that changing her appearance so much showed that she had put in a lot of effort. He advised her to take small steps, and reassured her that if she got used to communicating, everything would become easier. As Shizuki was speaking loudly to her, he suddenly realized that he was looking into Kusunoki's eyes without feeling uncomfortable, and he was also talking without being overwhelmed by irritation or anxiety. Shizuki quickly took her bag and prepared to leave. But Kusunoki quickly stopped him, begging him to wait. Shizuki turned back to look at her in shock. Kusunoki asked him how he could start with such small steps. Shizuki politely suggested that if she could make friends with someone to chat with, the rest would become easier. Suddenly, Kusunoki asked if he wanted to be her friend. Shizuki looked at her with wide eyes, completely stunned. She explained that he was someone she could talk to, then began begging him to be her friend. Shizuki was confused, wondering why Kusunoki wanted to be friends with him. He thought to himself, if Kusunoki improves her communication skills, she will become more and more prominent. Eventually, her personality may change, and then she will realize her true position. Shizuki realized those thoughts made sense. But when he looked at Kusunoki's sad face, he couldn't bear to refuse. After a moment of hesitation, he accepted her offer. Kusunoki was stunned to hear that, her eyes filled with tears as she happily thanked him for his kindness. Shizuki calmly adds that, although they will be friends, this is only a temporary arrangement until she makes friends with the others. Kusunoki smiled sweetly and replied that she was still very happy. Looking at her radiant face, Shizuki suddenly wondered if there was anything special about Kusunoki's eyes, and wondered if she had recovered from that strange disease. Kusunoki thanked him again, called him a friend and said she was glad to have met him. Shizuki thought, he still didn't fully understand the situation, but if this didn't cause any symptoms, then maybe it was a good thing. Even though they were friends now, he told himself that this relationship wouldn't change much. The next day, during lunch break, Shizuki sat in her seat to eat lunch as usual. Suddenly, Kusunoki walked over and sat right in front of him, at the same dining table. Shizuki felt awkward, telling herself that just because they were friends didn't mean men and women usually sat across from each other like this. He was confused and didn't understand what Kusunoki was thinking. When the other students saw that scene, they started whispering. Some girls whispered that Kusunoki was so agile when he was sticky to Shizuki. Meanwhile, some guys wondered why Kusunoki was sitting with him. Shizuki was stunned, thinking that everyone completely misunderstood the situation. With a smiling and polite expression, Kusunoki gently said that she always wanted to have lunch with a friend like this. Her words surprised Shizuki. At that moment, several of Shizuki's friends approached, teasing him that they would go eat at the cafeteria themselves, encouraging him to slowly enjoy this moment. Shizuki felt her irritation growing. He turned to Kusunoki, about to say something, but she politely asked, "Shizuki, what's wrong?" Instead, Shizuki put his head down on the table and sadly said that he had nothing to say. He thought to himself, this is the consequence of helping others. But when looking at Kusunoki, who had never had the opportunity to have lunch with friends before, Shizuki felt a bit of sympathy. He decided that, just for today, he would play this friends game. With a cute face, Kusunoki asked if she could call him Keisuke, from now on. Shizuki looked confused for a moment, but Kusunoki repeated himself, saying that since they were friends now, it made sense. In the end, Shizuki reluctantly agreed and told her to do what she wanted. He stood up from the chair and said he would go buy drinks for both of them. Kusunoki also immediately said that she would go along. Little did Shizuki know that his dream of a peaceful high school life was about to be completely turned upside down. As the two walked through the hallway, Shizuki suddenly faced a bigger threat. Standing in front of him was the person who had bullied him throughout middle school. Shizuki's heart began to beat rapidly. Familiar symptoms appeared again. Kusunoki, noticing his expression, worriedly asked, "Are you okay?" Shizuki turned to look at her, her eyes filled with horror. He couldn't believe that this was actually happening. He realized that the person who caused the biggest obsession in his life was standing in front of him. He thought back, remembering that he had carefully checked the class list and didn't see Takasaki Risa's name, but now, Hebikawa was right there. When another girl called Hebikawa's name and asked what happened, Hebikawa turned to ask Shizuki if he was okay. Shizuki quickly turned away, covered her face and answered briefly that she was okay. Hebikawa then asked Kusunoki if she was Shizuki's friend. Kusunoki confirmed that this was the case. Hebikawa looked at Shizuki one more time, commenting that he didn't look well and should probably go to the infirmary. She walked closer, gently advised Shizuki to take care of herself and then left. Shizuki, looking after Hibikawa, constantly thinking about her eyes, her voice and the ribbon in her hair. He was sure there was no mistake. That was the person who made his middle school years a nightmare. Shizuki held her head in panic, telling herself that her peaceful high school days were over. Noticing this, Kusunoki worriedly offered to take him to the infirmary and even said that she was willing to carry him if he couldn't walk. However, Shizuki remained focused on Hibikawa, filled with determination. He loudly declared that he would not let things end like that. Kusunoki appeared surprised by Shizuki's sudden action. Shizuki added that he won't let Hibikawa ruin his life, explaining that he decided to start over in high school for a good reason. He emphasizes that he said goodbye to the past, and to Hibikawa, a long time ago. When Shizuki loudly declared this, Kusunoki felt stunned and didn't understand what was going on. However, out of fear, she nodded and agreed with everything he said. Kusunoki then asked cautiously if Shizuki felt better now. Shizuki replies that he is fine, telling himself that if he focuses on school life, everything will be no problem. He was determined to maintain the peace he had achieved so hard in high school. When the school day ends and everyone is still in class, Kusunoki approached Shizuki with a shy expression, asking if they could go home together. For Shizuki, this is truly a big challenge. When the other students heard this, they all looked surprised. Meanwhile, Shizuki began to stutter, confused. Kusunoki asked if he had to go somewhere else. Shizuki, in a hurry, lies that it is. Hearing that, Kusunoki smiled gently and replied that if that was the case, it was okay, she could wait for him. Shizuki felt guilty thinking that Kusunoki's smile was too bright. Some boys in the class walked over, teasing that going home together sounded interesting. Shizuki started to sweat when one of the boys put his hand on his shoulder, saying that Shizuki seemed very close to Kusunoki. Another guy asked if Shizuki was dating Kusunoki. Shizuki was shocked and worried, thinking that if these famous students paid attention to her things would get worse. He hastily replied that they weren't dating and quickly ran away. The boys looked after him and commented that it was a pity that he had to go home today. They then turned to Kusunoki and suggested that she go with them instead of waiting for Shizuki. A moment later, Shizuki was walking down the street in a frustrated mood, muttering that today was really a bad day and nothing good happened. He also felt bad for leaving Kusunoki behind. While walking with those thoughts, he suddenly heard Kusunoki's voice calling him from behind. When he turned around, he was completely surprised to see Kusunoki standing there. Kusunoki greeted him politely, leaving Shizuki confused and worried, asking her why she was here. Kusunoki replied that she ran after him and complained that she was tired. Shizuki asked if she really ran to catch up with him and wondered why she would go to this extent. With a cute, radiant face, Kusunoki replied that she wanted to go home with him. Shizuki nervously puts her hands on her face, trying to hide her emotions, and Kusunoki asks if he doesn't like it. He replied that it wasn't that he hated it, but loudly said that, even though they were friends, it wasn't normal for a man and a woman to go home together. Kusunoki was surprised by his words. Shizuki went on to explain that even having lunch together was not ideal for either of them. Kusunoki asked in surprise why that looked so bad. Shizuki explains that others might misunderstand their relationship. Having finished speaking, he continued walking and told her not to talk too much in class. However, in her heart Shizuki thought that perhaps Kusunoki understood her point of view. But right after that, she called him again and said that she hadn't had many chances to talk to others. Kusunoki asks Shizuki for advice on how she can create more opportunities to interact with people. Shizuki felt sorry for Kusunoki. She then politely asked if she could call him in the evening from now on. Shizuki turned to look at her and loudly asked if she meant to make a phone call. Kusunoki confirmed and explained that they could talk on the phone without fear of anyone misunderstanding. She repeated her suggestion. Shizuki thought it was inappropriate to call a female friend at night. He wondered if Kusunoki was acting strange or if he was overthinking. However, Kusunoki continued to ask in a very polite manner, making Shizuki confused. Later, when she got home, Shizuki lay on her bed and stared at her phone. It was 2 a.m. He glanced at Kusunoki's phone number, saved in his contacts, and thought back to the moment she asked to make a phone call. At that time, he felt confused but agreed to her request. Now, both have saved each other's numbers. When Kusunoki saw Shizuki's number in his contacts, she appeared surprised and politely asked if she could call him tonight. Shizuki was surprised at first but agreed. However, he said he would take the initiative to call her. Kusunoki agreed and said she would wait for his call. Shizuki said that because he needed to mentally prepare first. Kusunoki smiled cutely and said she would wait. Shizuki lay on the bed, thinking about what she should do next. He didn't really want to call and didn't know what to talk about. He told himself that it had been so long since they last talked, that he had no idea. While lying down thinking, Shizuki's eyes stopped at the alarm clock. He picked it up and set the timer for 10 minutes, deciding that the call would only last 10 minutes. Then, Shizuki pressed the number and made the call. When the call was connected, Shizuki began with a greeting and introduced herself by name. Kusunoki responded by saying her name. Shizuki apologizes for calling so late, but Kusunoki reassures him and thanks him for calling. After that, the two fell into silence. Shizuki realized she was acting awkward and needed to say something. He started with a simple story, asking if today was colder than yesterday. Kusunoki replied that it was. Shizuki added that he was very uncomfortable with cold weather and asked about her hobbies. Kusunoki simply replied that she didn't really mind. Shizuki felt uncomfortable, thinking that Kusunoki didn't talk much and made the conversation awkward. At this moment, Shizuki realized that there were only 5 minutes left, so he decided to find a safe topic. He asked Kusunoki about her hobbies, or something like that. Kusunoki replied that she likes watching anime and reading manga. Shizuki is surprised by this hobby and says that he also likes those things. He asked her what genre she liked, and Kusunoki began to explain in great detail. After listening to her talk for a long time, Shizuki felt uncomfortable, thinking that she had become too talkative. When talking about her favorite series, Shizuki blurted out that she sounded like a typical otaku. Kusunoki asks if Shizuki has a favorite manga. Shizuki thought about her favorite manga from her childhood and answered, he likes a set called Asterisk. Kusunoki was immediately delighted, saying that she also liked the series and even owned all the volumes. Suddenly, the alarm clock rang. Shizuki looked over and Kusunoki asked what that sound was. Shizuki replied that it was nothing and then asked if she had heard rumors about the third part of the manga being released next year. Kusunoki becomes curious, asking Shizuki to tell more details about it. The next day, when Shizuki was sitting in class and feeling dizzy, he checked his phone and noticed the time of the call with Kusunoki. He was surprised to see that the call lasted 1 hour and 32 minutes. He didn't understand why the conversation took so long and felt a bit confused. He told himself that maybe it was because he was also an otaku at heart, so he got along so easily. Suddenly, Kusunoki entered the classroom. Shizuki noticed that she looked sad, and he couldn't help but be surprised to see her like that. Kusunoki put his bag on the table and wished Shizuki good morning. Shizuki replied, "Good morning." He looked at her and wondered what had happened, because yesterday she was so happy. Then Shizuki shook her head, realizing she didn't need to worry about that. He decided that during class, he should avoid talking to Kusunoki as much as possible. Thinking of this, Shizuki tried not to talk to her, but he couldn't stop glancing at her. When school is over, and everyone is getting ready to leave, Shizuki called Kusunoki in the hallway. He walked closer to her and she asked if anything was wrong. Shizuki replied that it was nothing, but he felt awkward and didn't know what to say. Finally, he calmly said that he noticed that she looked sad today, even though he initially intended to avoid saying anything. Kusunoki started talking about their phone call yesterday. She realized that she had been talking the whole time and felt very sorry. She sat down, her face full of regret. Shizuki was surprised by her reaction, and he thought she felt bad about it. He comforted her, saying that their call was to help her get used to talking and that there was no need to worry, it was nothing serious. Even so, Kusunoki was still sad. She said the conversation felt very one-sided. She was the only one having fun and now she feels bad. Shizuki felt guilty and gently told her there was no need to apologize. Shizuki continued to comfort her, saying that their conversation was really interesting. Kusunoki was surprised by his comment. Suddenly, Shizuki's friends, Hareno and Tsuji, appear. Shizuki is startled to see them and they ask him what he is doing, saying that they were looking for him because he suddenly disappeared. They approached and asked if they were bothering him. One of them added that Shizuki seemed to have forgotten her friends. Shizuki politely assures that this is not the case. Hareno then asked what the relationship between Shizuki and Kusunoki was. Suddenly, Shizuki hurriedly said goodbye to Kusunoki, surprising her with his sudden action. Shizuki told her to go home and she agreed. His friends looked on with disappointment and politely asked if he really wasn't going with Kusunoki. They apologized to Shizuki for their previous comments, but Shizuki consoles them, claiming that he said he had nothing to do with such things. Meanwhile, Kusunoki was on his way home when he suddenly stopped, turned around and called Shizuki with a bright smile. She said she also enjoyed chatting last night and wished him a good day. Shizuki and his friends were completely surprised by this action. Shizuki was worried about what his friends would say next. His friends looked at him with annoyance and teased that it looked like he had fun last night. Shizuki hastily explains that there is nothing like that, and claims it was just a misunderstanding. In class, Hareno asked Shizuki with a serious face if he really didn't do anything to Kusunoki. Shizuki tries to stay calm, repeating that they have no such relationship. Hareno admitted that she didn't completely trust him. Shizuki felt a headache from these questions, and realized that it was Kusunoki's vague words that made everything confusing. Tsuji adds that Shizuki is the only person Kusunoki calls by name, and they seem very close. Tsuji also said that in his eyes, the two looked quite close. Hareno agreed with Tsuji. Shizuki explains that he and Kusunoki simply went to the same high school and that she is his best friend in the group. Hareno was surprised to hear that they attended the same high school. Hareno says that Shizuki is lucky, then comments that Kusunoki must have been very beautiful back then, and wishes he could have seen her. Hearing that, Shizuki stood up and loudly asked them to stop and end the conversation. You guys looked at him with confusion. Hareno then said that he also wanted to be friends with Kusunoki, and asked Shizuki if he could arrange for them to have lunch together. Shizuki stepped forward and firmly refused. He thought it was impossible, because Kusunoki had difficulty communicating, and Hareno couldn't sit still. As Shizuki was going down the stairs, the thought of Kusunoki and Hareno meeting each other gave him a headache. He then realized that if they could get along, he wouldn't have to worry about Kusunoki making friends anymore. He told himself that if he could do this, a threat to his peaceful life would be eliminated. At that moment, from the other side of the hallway, Hebikawa walked up and they collided, causing her books to fall. Shizuki quickly apologized and asked if Hebikawa was okay. When Shizuki saw Hebikawa, he couldn't help but be surprised to see her sitting on the floor. Hebikawa commented that they kept bumping into each other, then smiled cutely and said that they seemed to have a habit of meeting like that. Suddenly, Shizuki bowed her head and started screaming in frustration. Hebikawa was surprised by his reaction. At that moment, Tsuji arrived and observed the situation, noticing that Shizuki seemed to be mentally disturbed. Tsuji approached and asked what happened. Hebikawa explains that she thought Shizuki suddenly got sick. Tsuji was surprised by her explanation, and Hebikawa turned to Shizuki and politely asked if he could stand up. She asked Tsuji to help her pick up fallen books. As they work together to help Shizuki and pack up the books, Hebikawa comments that they are such good friends, and with a sweet smile, she told Shizuki to take care of herself. After Hebikawa left, Tsuji suddenly grabbed Shizuki and asked if he was her friend. Shizuki trembled, resolutely denied and affirmed that Tsuji had misunderstood. He had no relationship with Hebikawa. Hareno asked Tsuji if he knew Hebikawa. Tsuji replied that he knew, and said that he knew all the beautiful girls on the block. He explained that Hebikawa is in 8th grade and is rumored to be the second most beautiful girl this year. Hareno immediately asked who the most beautiful girl was. Tsuji replied that the most beautiful girl was Kusunoki. Shizuki turned to Tsuji with a dissatisfied expression, asking if that was why he should feel grateful to be friends with Kusunoki. Tsuji replied that he also wanted a chance to get to know her better, and asked Shizuki for help. Shizuki agrees to ask Kusunoki. Tsuji was happy to hear that. Later, Shizuki calls Kusunoki and asks if they can have lunch together. Kusunoki refused, saying she was not interested. Shizuki was surprised and asked if she really refused his invitation. Kusunoki confirmed that she refused. Shizuki felt surprised when Kusunoki bluntly refused her lunch invitation. Kusunoki asked him what he wanted to discuss, because he said he needed to ask her something. Shizuki explained that he wanted her to consider it a short course to improve her communication skills, and emphasized that she had nothing to lose by participating. Kusunoki clarified that when she talked about eating together, she only meant that Hareno would join. Shizuki added that Tsuji would also be present. And he politely asked her if she was comfortable with having more people. Shizuki reassures Kusunoki that Hareno will be a better friend than him. But the surprising thing is that Kusunoki did not agree. She says that if they have lunch together, Shizuki must be present, otherwise she won't participate, and the sadness on her face is obvious. Shizuki noticed her sullen expression and asked if she was angry with him. At the same time, he apologized because he felt responsible for her sadness. Kusunoki said she was going to sleep and hung up. Shizuki looked at his phone, noticed their call lasted about 15 minutes, and felt confused, wondering if she was angry with him or if he said something wrong. Meanwhile, Kusunoki was sitting on the floor and feeling sad. The next morning, Shizuki and Kusunoki went to the cafeteria for lunch together, along with Tsuji and Hareno. As they sat around the table and enjoyed their meal, Hareno commented that for some reason the food was especially delicious today. Shizuki looked towards Tsuji, expecting his opinion, but Tsuji, with his usual attitude, just shrugged and replied that the dish was nothing special. Shizuki sipped her juice while sitting calmly. Shizuki observed the group of friends, feeling that Hareno seemed too excited. When his eyes passed over Kusunoki, she was eating quietly and with a sad expression. It made Shizuki feel sad when he saw her like that. He wondered if she was okay, when he realized she hadn't said a word. Suddenly, Hareno curiously asked Kusunoki if she attended the same high school as Shizuki. Kusunoki was a bit surprised by that question. Shizuki explains that although they went to the same school, they were in different classes and only started talking when they reached high school. Tsuji casually remarks that this means they haven't been friends for long. Then Hareno stood up, showing a confused smile. And Hareno told Shizuki that, although he was a little worried, he also wanted to be friends with Kusunoki. He held out his hand and asked her to announce his phone number, and offered to give her his number. This unexpected action made everyone surprised and silent. Kusunoki did not respond, making Hareno realize that she was ignoring him. He hastily apologized for his sudden approach. Shizuki observed the situation, then turned to Kusunoki, gently reassuring her that it was okay and that he thought she and Hareno would be good friends. He adds that when Kusunoki gets to know Hareno better, she will see that he is quite a serious and kind person. Kusunoki remained silent, a bit confused, but she trusted Shizuki and agreed with his words. She smiled and said that if Shizuki said so, she would do it. Tsuji and Hareno were both surprised by Kusunoki's reaction. Hareno quickly thanked Kusunoki for her kindness and asked her to wait a bit since he didn't have his phone with him. Shizuki said that Hareno's phone might be in the classroom. Hareno promised to return soon. After a while, at school, Shizuki and Hareno stood next to each other. Hareno clasped his hands in front of his chest and sincerely thanked Shizuki for helping him build a relationship with Kusunoki. Shizuki humbly said that she didn't do much. However, Hareno firmly asserted that it was all thanks to Shizuki. He said that he never thought he would be able to exchange contact information with Kusunoki. While observing Hareno, Shizuki noticed that he seemed especially happy about this. He noticed Hareno's obvious joy that showed he really liked Kusunoki. Shizuki smiles and says that Hareno is experiencing the wonders of youth. Shizuki then politely asked if they were done and should they return to class. However, Hareno stopped him and said that he had one more request. Shizuki started sweating, wondering what it was. Hareno's request was that he wanted Kusunoki and him to have lunch together. Shizuki agrees and sends a message to Kusunoki on Hareno's behalf. As she sent the message, Shizuki felt anger rising, thinking that Hareno should have asked Kusunoki himself. However, he still sent it because Hareno begged him, saying he was too shy to make that request directly. Shizuki also wonders if Hareno is so shy that she can't ask Kusunoki for lunch in person. Why does he still want her phone number? After a while, Shizuki sat in the classroom, and Kusunoki was also there. When she picked up her phone, Shizuki noticed she had seen her messages. He gestured to get her attention, but when she looked at him, she suddenly looked down, looked sad and said nothing. Shizuki was stunned and confused about her reaction. He thought that Kusunoki might be intentionally avoiding him and wondered if she was angry, which could explain her actions. He wondered why she felt that way. At that moment, Tsuji approached Shizuki to say goodbye as class ended. Shizuki returned the greeting in silence. Kusunoki stood up, grabbed his bag and went out. Shizuki realized that Kusunoki had been acting strange since yesterday's phone call, and her attitude at lunch today was no different. Suddenly, Shizuki placed her hand on her head, feeling a surge of anxiety. He told himself that he needed to stop thinking so much about girls and calm down. Shizuki decided that she wouldn't pay attention to Kusunoki's mood anymore. Whether she's angry or not is none of your business. When Kusunoki quietly left the school, Shizuki followed her and before long, they were standing together on the street. With a polite but somewhat worried expression, Kusunoki asked him what was wrong. Shizuki remained silent, looking at the ground, feeling uncomfortable having to ask about Kusunoki's behavior. However, in the end he still asked her why she was avoiding him. Kusunoki simply responded by asking if they should continue talking to each other. Shizuki felt confused by her answer. Kusunoki went on to point out that he was the one who said he didn't want her to talk to him at school. Hearing that, Shizuki felt guilty, and he realized that Kusunoki really knew how to reason. Kusunoki turned around and started walking, leaving Shizuki standing and watching. She said she knew he hated her. Shizuki was shocked by this accusation, and Kusunoki glanced back at him and continued, saying that she could sense the change in his attitude, that he was pushing her away from his friends. With a sad expression, Kusunoki sighed, saying that she knew he wanted to end this friendship, and that was the reason why she acted like that. At this moment, Shizuki suddenly realized that Kusunoki might be right, even though he was the one who had seen her encounter difficult situations similar to the ones he had experienced, and had sought to approach her. He became aware of her feelings and began to regret it. Shizuki understood that she had paid too much attention to her own feelings and accidentally considered Kusunoki an unimportant person. He sat back in silence, remembering his childhood days when he used to approach someone with a heart full of hope, wanting to be their friend. At that time, that person declined Shizuki's friend request and apologized. Shizuki now realized how deeply that action hurt others. He realized that he had done wrong, so Shizuki approached Kusunoki, sincerely apologizing and asking for her forgiveness. Kusunoki sat down on the ground, her expression still sad. She politely admitted that she was not good at talking to boys. She said she was bullied in middle school, and from then on, boys always made her feel scared. Shizuki points out that he is also a boy. Kusunoki quickly looked at him, firmly saying that he was an exception, different from everyone else. Kusunoki goes on to say that in middle school, Shizuki was often in the library like her, and they were in the same class. She admitted that she never thought they would go to the same high school, or have so much in common. Kusunoki said that she felt comfortable when she was with Shizuki, and that's why she's willing to let him be her only boyfriend, even though she really wants to have more friends. Shizuki sat down next to her, tears falling. He said he understood and wouldn't try to find more friends for her anymore. Kusunoki thought to himself, while Shizuki felt her heart pounding, fast and strong. Then Kusunoki revealed that her heart was beating just as hard. Shizuki was surprised to hear this, and Kusunoki gave him a warm, polite smile saying that this was the first time she had had a disagreement with a friend. Shizuki's eyes stopped. He realized that this was the first time he had a disagreement with a girlfriend, and so his heart was also pounding. Kusunoki stood up and politely asked if they could continue to talk to each other, even at school. Shizuki agreed and gave her permission, as Kusunoki walked away with a happy heart. Shizuki stood looking at her from behind, still feeling confused and wondering if there was another reason why her heart was beating so strongly. The next day, while they were in class, a teacher walked in with a cheerful look on her face. She announced that to help all the new students get to know each other, they will hold a traditional dodgeball tournament where all the classes will compete against each other. The teacher went on to say that, since not everyone could be on the same team, they would draw lots to decide the team members. Hearing that, Shizuki felt sad and thought that the teacher must have seen them as children when organizing a pitching tournament. He was worried that he might be chosen as a player and ruin the game in front of everyone, which would be very embarrassing. He also realized that if they competed against other classes, Hebikawa would also be present, making him even more nervous. Shizuki stepped up to draw lots, feeling extremely nervous. Just thinking about being chosen made him feel nauseous. And prayed in my heart that I would not be chosen. He prayed to God for strength to overcome this challenge. After the lottery was drawn, Shizuki and the others sat on the stairs. Shizuki was still in a sad mood, while Tsuji and Hareno were very happy. Tsuji was drinking juice, and the others were also eating freely. Tsuji, in a calm tone, said that luck seemed to be on Shizuki's side. And he also wished he could play. Shizuki felt an uneasy feeling when drawing lots, and despite having a bad premonition, in the end the result remained unchanged. He simply sighed, saying he wanted to go home. Tsuji nodded in agreement, saying that just cheering for his team was quite boring, and he also wanted to go home. Hareno, in a loud and clear voice, commented that the group's morale was too low, and he urged everyone to get excited. Having finished speaking, Hareno immediately walked up the stairs. Tsuji wondered about the source of this enthusiasm, repeating that he was not a member of the team, so it was best to calm down. Hareno, with a mischievous smile, replied, "Think for a moment, they don't normally get to take physical education lessons with girls. But today is different. They will wear sports clothes, and seeing this scene will be enough." Tsuji and Shizuki remained calm, looking forward. Seeing their lack of enthusiasm, Hareno felt annoyed, and told them not to ignore him. Just then, Kusunoki appeared and called Shizuki's name, saying that she had finally found him. Kusunoki also wears casual clothes. And the teacher is about to start explaining the rules of the game and wants all team members to go to the gym. She asked Shizuki if he wanted to come along. Before Shizuki could answer, Hareno immediately said that Shizuki was going. Hareno ordered him to leave immediately. Shizuki is surprised by this request and realizes that Kusunoki has definitely been chosen for the team. He told her that he hadn't finished eating yet, so she could go first. Hareno sternly warned that Shizuki had no right to refuse Kusunoki's invitation and forced him to leave immediately. Shizuki reluctantly agrees and goes with Kusunoki. As they walked, Kusunoki asked if he was sure it was okay. Shizuki reassures her that it's okay and tells her not to worry. When he looked at her more closely, Shizuki noticed that her face was shining with excitement. He commented that she looked very excited. Kusunoki was surprised to hear that. Shizuki explains that he thought she didn't like these kinds of events, and now he's surprised to see that she likes them. With a slightly confused expression, Kusunoki said that it was true that she didn't like them. But then she smiled and added that this time it might be fun because they would play together. Shizuki was surprised by her words, suddenly turned away, feeling my face heat up. He thought to himself that today must be a particularly warm day. When they arrived at the area where everyone was gathering, the teacher stood in front and happily announced that Class A's first match was against Class B. Hearing that, Shizuki felt worried, lamenting that he couldn't endure. Suddenly, Harino appeared and called Shizuki from behind, mocking him for giving up before the match started and asking him to show fighting spirit. Shizuki is surprised to see Harino there and asks why he showed up when he wasn't participating in the match. Harino replied that he switched places with someone who didn't want to play. Harino added that his greatest wish was to protect Kusunoki himself. Shizuki thought that if that was the case, why didn't Harino switch places with him? Meanwhile, a few male friends approached Harino, firmly saying that they also wanted to protect Kusunoki and laughing at Harino's complacency. Harino, angry, turns back to Shizuki and warns him that if he thinks he can defeat him, he is wrong. Shizuki, confused, asks again if they aren't teammates. As they argued, a group of girls in the corner of the room observed them. The girls wondered why the boys were so loud and annoying. Kusunoki accidentally heard their conversation. A girl comments that all of this happened because of Kusunoki and that the boys in the class are all idiots. Another girl agreed, saying that Kusunoki was at the center of it all, and that from what she saw, Kusunoki was like a girl who devours men. Hearing these words, Kusunoki felt extremely sad and bowed his head in shame. Shizuki noticed her sadness and nervously approached. He politely asked Kusunoki if anything was wrong. Kusunoki slapped herself hard on the face and quickly affirmed that she was fine. A moment later, the team's lineup was completed. Shizuki looked around worriedly, feeling uneasy. The teacher announced that the match between Class A and Class B was about to start. Harino looked excited, but Shizuki couldn't stop worrying about Hebikawa. He observed the opposing team and realized that she was not on the team, nor was she behind the starting line. He wondered if she might not come to school today. A feeling of relief rose in Shizuki's heart, and he silently thanked heaven and earth, thinking that his prayers had been answered. He was really glad that Hebikawa hadn't appeared until now. However, at that moment the teacher started looking around, looking confused, and asked if anyone was missing. Shizuki, with an innocent expression, pretended to ask, "Who hasn't come yet?" At that moment, footsteps sounded, and Hebikawa appeared. Shizuki's relief immediately faded when he realized that she had arrived, finally appearing. With a bright smile, Hebikawa apologized to everyone for making everyone wait. She explained that it took some time to change but hoped everyone wouldn't mind. The teacher, even though she was late, happily accepted her apology and reminded her to be more punctual next time. The teacher then ordered everyone to line up. While Shizuki looked after Hebikawa, he felt sweat starting to break out and became more and more nervous. Tsuji also worriedly looked after Hebikawa and muttered that he couldn't ask for anything more. Shizuki felt a deep anxiety, thinking that this situation was the worst. However, he reminded himself to stay calm and face the situation rationally. He decided that there was only one optimal course for him at the moment, and resolved to act quickly. When the match starts, the players move and pass the ball. Shizuki quickly stood in position to catch the ball. Suddenly, Harino stood in front of him and grabbed the ball. Harino apologizes to Shizuki, saying that today is his chance to shine. Shizuki felt anger rising inside her, but Harino continued, saying that he needed to impress Kusunoki with his skills. Harino tossed the ball, aiming at an opponent. But the ball accidentally slipped out of his hand and flew straight towards Hebikawa. Both Harino and Shizuki were surprised by the unexpected situation. When the ball was about to hit Hebikawa, another player rushed in and blocked the ball, saving her from impact. That player, with a confident expression, declared that he was the one who would protect Hebikawa. He looked back at Hebikawa and calmly assured her that he would deal with anyone who tried to target her. Hebikawa thanked him with a sweet smile. Filled with anger, that player threw the ball vigorously towards Harino, and the ball hit Harino, causing him to fall hard to the ground. Shizuki worriedly watched Harino fall, feeling a fever of anxiety rising in her heart. Meanwhile, the members of the opposing team declared that they would not lose this match. They attacked each other violently, throwing balls at each other. And they even targeted the girls, creating a chaotic scene on the field. After a while, all the players were eliminated from the match, leaving only Shizuki and Kusunoki on one side, and Hebikawa and her rescuer on the other side. Shizuki scanned the field, looking for an opportunity to win the ball and make an attack. The players on the sideline cheered loudly, admiring that only 4 people remained. Feeling tense, Shizuki thought to himself that this was the end of the match, and he was still stuck here. He wondered what to do next. From the sidelines, Harino shouted at him, urging him to play his best and making sure Kusunoki wouldn't get hurt. Shizuki felt that they had come a long way, but still had to play defense to the end. He feels conflicted about having to protect Kusunoki, which makes him feel like his hands and feet are tied. While thinking about this, Kusunoki suddenly stepped forward and stood bravely facing the opposing player. Shizuki was stunned and quickly called out to her not to stand in front of him. He worried about her safety, insisting that standing so close to someone like that was too dangerous. The opposing player threw the ball at Kusunoki, declaring that he would not be lenient just because she was a girl, so she should not expect leniency. When the ball rushed towards Kusunoki, Shizuki rushed forward, jumping in front of her to protect her. The ball hit him hard, causing him to fall to the ground. Kusunoki was stunned by Shizuki's brave actions. While Shizuki lay on the floor, groaning in pain. He lamented that he couldn't catch the ball, and wondered why someone would throw the ball so hard at a girl. Shizuki thought that if he had not intervened, that pitch would have definitely hit Kusunoki very hard. As Shizuki lay on the ground, he suddenly remembered the words he had said before about Kusunoki. She walked over and looked at him worriedly, her eyes gentle but full of concern. She asked if he was okay and apologized for everything. Seeing the painful scratch on Shizuki's arm, Kusunoki exclaimed in surprise. She told him he was injured and advised him to see a doctor immediately. Shizuki reassured her, told her she was okay, and advised her to stay away from that rough player. Suggested that she should play defense to protect herself. However, Kusunoki still stood up, took the ball back and declared that he would avenge Shizuki. Shizuki was surprised by her determination. With rising anger, Kusunoki stepped forward and threw the ball towards the player who injured Shizuki. The throw was so strong that the man fell to the ground, losing consciousness immediately. The whole school was stunned by the power of the throw. The other players couldn't believe their eyes, exclaiming that it was impossible. Hebikawa looked at the fallen player, but remained silent. The teacher's voice then rang out declaring that Kusunoki's performance was amazing, as she knocked out 2 opposing players in a single throw and declared Class A the winner. Kusunoki turned to Shizuki with a sweet smile. Shizuki was completely stunned. He thought about the situation, wondering if Kusunoki had always been this strong. He lowered his head, muttering that everything was better than he thought. Another girl worriedly asked Hebikawa if she was okay after Kusunoki's throw. She commented that Kusunoki is a true trump card. Another girl approached Hebikawa again, smiling and saying she hoped her arm wouldn't be broken. Hebikawa glared and angrily asked why she was laughing. The girl quickly apologized. After that, Shizuki and her friends went together. Tsuji comments that he never thought they would win the match. Harino is happy, praising Kusunoki, saying he didn't expect her to be so impressed. Meanwhile, Shizuki felt a bit sad. Harino suddenly remembered that he forgot to greet Kusunoki and was about to go see her. Tsuji suggests that Harino can forget, pointing out that something strange is going on. When Shizuki turned to look, he was surprised to see a crowd of boys gathered around Kusunoki, excitedly praising her bravery. Shizuki is surprised, thinking about her sudden fame. He decided maybe he should step in and help her a little. Seeing the crowd around Kusunoki, Harino commented on her newfound popularity. Tsuji agrees, commenting that Kusunoki is like the main character in the story, while they are just supporting characters from different worlds. He gently pushed Harino, suggesting that they leave so as not to bother her further. As they left, Shizuki stood looking at Kusunoki with a sad expression. He bowed his head and followed them out. His mood dropped as he thought about Tsuji's words about them coming from 2 different worlds. Suddenly, Kusunoki approached and asked if she did anything to upset him. Shizuki was startled, quickly responded that she startled him and asked for a moment to regain her breath. Kusunoki noticed that their eyes had met, and it seemed like Shizuki was trying to avoid her. Shizuki hastily reassured her, explaining that he didn't want to bother her and thought it would be better to go out for a bit. Kusunoki came closer and gently said that he never bothered her. Shizuki was surprised by those words, seeing tears in her eyes. Kusunoki admitted that she actually wanted Shizuki to come closer and talk to her. She explained that with so many people around, she felt overwhelmed and almost fainted. Shizuki looked at her expression and understood what she meant. Suddenly, Kusunoki bowed his head and let out a small sigh. Worried, Shizuki asked her what was wrong. Kusunoki raised her head, smiled sweetly, and said that she felt relieved that they finally had a chance to talk. Shizuki replied that he was also happy to have this moment with her. He felt a wave of relief, knowing that Kusunoki was okay. Hearing a slight noise, Kusunoki curiously asked if he said anything. Shizuki replied that it was nothing, telling her not to bother. He turned around, smiled and said they would meet again, reminding her to change clothes. Kusunoki felt confused by Shizuki's words. But she continued to walk, thinking that if he told her to ignore something, it would surely only haunt her forever. While Kusunoki was thinking about Shizuki's words, Hebikawa, the girl from the previous day's match, suddenly appeared from another room. Kusunoki was surprised to see Hebikawa and commented that she was from Class B. Hebikawa introduces herself, and Kusunoki realizes that although she recognized Hebikawa during the match, she is now more attractive than ever. Kusunoki's eyes then fell to Hebikawa's arm, which was wrapped in bandages. She worriedly asked if Hebikawa was injured. Hebikawa nodded in confirmation and said with a smile that her arm had swollen since the match. She continued praising Kusunoki for being stronger than she appeared. Kusunoki apologized shyly and gently suggested that if Hebikawa felt unwell, she could boil or fry something for her, if that would make her feel better. Hebikawa comforted her, telling her that there was no need to be too fussy, her arm was fine now and no longer hurt. Then Hebikawa came closer and said that she found Kusunoki really interesting. She revealed that she had been thinking about Kusunoki for a long time. Kusunoki was stunned and surprised by Hebikawa's words. Hebikawa politely asked if they could be friends, leaving Kusunoki completely surprised by the offer. Kusunoki smiled confusedly and asked again, "Does Hebikawa really want to be her friend?" Hebikawa confirmed with a smile, saying she was happy to be friends with a lovely girl like Kusunoki. Kusunoki felt nervous about this new friendship, but she eventually agreed, and told Hebikawa that she would look out for her. Hebikawa then asked Kusunoki to call her Risa instead of Hebikawa, because she did not like her last name. Kusunoki agreed and suggested that she could call Hebikawa Risa. The two smiled and started walking side by side, happy with this new friendship. Suddenly Kusunoki stopped and began to think deeply. She realized that she needed to tell Shizuki about this new friendship. Politely, Kusunoki asked Hebikawa if they could temporarily put their friendship on hold so she could talk to Shizuki first. That night, Kusunoki called Shizuki and told him everything. Shizuki was stunned and asked if she had really become friends with Hebikawa. Kusunoki confirmed, explaining that after the match, Hebikawa approached her and asked to be friends. Shizuki was surprised at first, but then he reconsidered Kusunoki's impressive performance in the handball match. He realized maybe the positive impression she made on the girls led to this new friendship. Shizuki understood the situation and commented that this was good news, congratulating Kusunoki. However, she announced that their friendship is still on hold. Shizuki curiously asked why. Kusunoki explains that if she doesn't, she may have to end her friendship with him. This makes Shizuki remember the words he said earlier, that their friendship would end if she made new friends, and that their relationship was only temporary. He realized he had forgotten that. Kusunoki admitted that perhaps this was somewhat selfish on his part. She politely added that she wanted to spend more time with Shizuki. Confused, Shizuki asked why she said that. Kusunoki explains that she likes him, leaving Shizuki surprised and shocked by her confession. She reassures him that she is telling the truth, and explains that he is the first friend she has truly had. Shizuki sat back in her chair, confused as to whether she meant friendship or something else. He wondered why she spoke so vaguely. Kusunoki quickly added that if her emotions made Shizuki uncomfortable, she would retreat. Shizuki reassures her that it doesn't bother him at all. When Kusunoki heard Shizuki's answer, she suddenly shouted over the phone in excitement. Shizuki was surprised and asked her to stop screaming. She started laughing, apologizing for her outburst and expressing her joy at being able to continue this friendship. Meanwhile, Shizuki reflects that maybe he was expecting too much, since it was Kusunoki after all. He thought she might say something like that if she made new friends, but he felt this was somewhat unfair to him. Kusunoki feels relieved and happy, excitedly saying that now she can share this good news with Risa. Shizuki then asked Kusunoki about her new friend. Kusunoki happily replies that her new friend is Risa Hebikawa from Class B, adding that she will introduce her to Shizuki later. When Shizuki heard Hebikawa's name, he was shocked and screamed through the phone. Kusunoki was surprised by his reaction, asking him not to yell like that. The next day, at school, Shizuki sat alone at her desk, absolutely silent. Tsuji glanced and asked, "What's wrong?" It's like Shizuki's soul left his body. Harino comments that he doesn't know what happened, but Shizuki has been like that since morning. Meanwhile, Shizuki is lost in thought, worried that Kusunoki was not the one who initiated this friendship, but Hebikawa. He wondered why Hebikawa did that and worried that their personalities might not be compatible. He was afraid that if things didn't go well, Kusunoki might be bullied. As he was contemplating these worries, Harino suddenly looked out the window, a surprised look on his face. Harino loudly called out to Tsuji, "Look outside, it's crazy." He pointed out that Kusunoki and Hebikawa were standing together, chat happily. Tsuji looked over, commenting that it seemed like they were quite close to each other. He wondered, It was the first time he saw Kusunoki interacting with other girls. Hirano smiled brightly, emphasizing that only the most beautiful and talented students can make friends with each other. When Shizuki heard that, he shouted angrily, strongly asserting that they were not the same. Hirano was surprised by Shizuki's reaction. After Shizuki left, Hirano turned to Tsuji and asked what was going on. Tsuji admitted he didn't know, only knowing that both Kusunoki and Hebikawa were very beautiful, but they were completely different. A while later, Shizuki and Kusunoki cleaned the school hallway together. Kusunoki gently informed Shizuki that she planned to go out with Hebikawa. Shizuki was surprised, asking again if she was really going out with her. Kusunoki replied that they would go out this Sunday. Shizuki felt upset, wondering if they were that close or if he had misjudged the situation. Suddenly, a thought occurred to me. He asked Kusunoki if she had talked about their high school days with Hebikawa. Kusunoki replied that she had never mentioned that. Shizuki felt relieved, thinking that if everyone knew that Kusunoki and he had attended the same middle school, not only Kusunoki but also him might get into trouble. While chatting, Shizuki noticed a group of girls chatting upstairs. He called Kusunoki closer to a corner under the stairs. Kusunoki agrees and follows Shizuki to a hidden place where they can chat privately. Shizuki gently advised her not to mention their middle school to Hebikawa, because Hebikawa also studied at that school. Kusunoki was surprised by this information. Shizuki explains that Hebikawa's name back then was Takasaki. He asked Kusunoki if he remembered Hebikawa from high school. Kusunoki shook her head, saying she didn't know because she didn't interact much with anyone that day. Shizuki gently reminded him that if Hebikawa found out they went to the same school, it could cause big trouble. Therefore, she should avoid mentioning anything related to middle school to Hebikawa. Kusunoki happily agreed with Shizuki's advice. He added that if Hebikawa brings up middle school, she should try to change the subject or steer the conversation in another direction. Kusunoki understood his instructions and nodded. As Shizuki started to leave, Kusunoki called him back. She politely asked if she could contact him tonight, even though it wasn't practice day. She said there was something she wanted to ask him. Shizuki asks if she can ask now. Kusunoki replied that she couldn't say right now, but she has something to show him. Shizuki felt surprised and shocked by her words. Kusunoki explains that she will send him a photo when she gets home. She added that since the photo was somewhat embarrassing, he should be sure to look at it while he was alone.